again, YouTubers. Today I'm going to get into the basics of, say you just got a first nitro. Your first nitro. Basically getting into the very beginnings of it, breaking it in, tuning it. So I'll get straight into it. Like I've done in past videos, there's going to be two different types of carbs that you're going to come across. You're going to have a slide carb, which is exactly as it sounds, it slides. And then you're going to have a rotary carb where this part actually spins, and I have a car right here. This is my RS4 Drift. And with this one, it actually spins. But a lot of times from the factory, things will be set close to where they need to be. But you have to realize temperature, the height you live at, basically any atmospheric condition, humidity, temperature, barometric pressure, all those are going to make a difference when it comes to actually coming time to tuning it. So the first thing, well, my collar is crap right now. First thing you're going to want to do is, with either a rotary type carb or slide carb, set your idle gap to usually about the thickness of a thumbnail, about half a millimeter, maybe 0.75 millimeters. It's very small. Once you set that, you really don't touch the idle gap ever again. You do your idle tuning from the low speed needle. And then you have your high speed needle. That comes into play when you actually pull the trigger, and that's when it starts dumping in fuel for high speed runs, stuff like that. But we have to realize with these motors, our fuel pump is actually exhaust pressure. So when you give it full power, there's going to be more exhaust pressure, which in turn pushes more fuel into the carb, into the engine. Because nitro, these little carbs don't have enough of a venturi to make enough vacuum to actually pull the gas through the, oh crap, I can't even remember the jets and into the motor. Basically, the fuel is pushed into the carburetor and into the air, the incoming air. Excuse me. So that's how these work. If there's any air leak, if there's an air leak in your exhaust, if there's an air leak at your carb, if there's an air leak anywhere, that's going to cause problems. But new, that's not going to happen. So when you get it new, you're going to want to somehow figure out some way to get it up off the ground. That ain't gonna work. But you don't want the wheels touching the ground. And then at this point, you start it. If it's idling too high, reach in your low speed needle. Your low speed needle on this vehicle is right here. This is a slide type carburetor. So on this one, the low speed needle is right here, and the high speed needle is right here. That's usually how it is. Some carburetors also have a mid-speed needle. Personally, I don't like those, but HPI K4.6 and K5.9 motors have those. But as for getting it broken in, Traxxas does a method where you do 2 minutes on the throttle for 25% and then off and just back on. With that, you'll get decent power for a little while, but they're looking at getting decent power and also not the greatest engine life. So basically what you're going to want to do is fill your tank up, get it idling, and get the engine around about 200, 220 degrees. Let it idle an entire tank. You don't want the wheels to be spinning. You don't want anything to be happening. You just want the engine to be idling. If the wheels are spinning, that means your idle is too high. Reach in your low speed needle. If you have to, you can always close the idle gap a little, but that's not how you're really supposed to do it. Once you set your idle gap, you're not really supposed to mess with it unless it's not set correctly. So that may be a reason that you may have to change your idle gap. So after you've ran a tank, you're going to want to let it cool. This is what's known as heat cycling. You're going to want to do this 4 times. The 5th time, you can decide, or you can even start doing this from the first tank. You can cover the head with, a lot of people use foamies that you put around a beer mug, not a beer mug, a beer can to keep them cold. Cut it to fit. And basically what this will do is keep all the heat inside the engine. This tempers the internal parts, makes them harder without adding weight. RB Mods has perfected this technique. He actually does it after the 3rd tank. But after each tank, you're going to want to bump up the idle a little bit. Not a lot, because like I said, you don't want the wheels spinning at all. Now, if it starts and you have a high idle, and you've done everything, and you can't figure out what the hell is going on, most likely if you have a high idle and there's problems starting, you have an air leak somewhere. That is creating a lean condition. When nitro engines are lean, that means they're going to idle higher. I had that exact problem with, crap, I still haven't put body clips in this to hold it down. With this one, the exhaust flange, it kept leaking, so that gave me a lean condition. So I basically just had to modify it and put some copper RTV on it, sealed it up. It works perfect now. So most of the time, if you have a high idle and you've tried everything, usually there's an air leak. It could be at the back plate, it could be at the carb, maybe at the front bearing. That would be worst case scenario. Just check everything. Your exhaust gasket, your header to muffler coupler, or some of them, they even have like Navarrose's pipes like that. There's actually a seal where the two come together and springs to hold it together. So yeah, you're going to want to check that, but you're going to want to idle it for at least 5 tanks. Personally, I don't really like to temper my bashers. I'm just going to have fun with them. I've had a lot of people talk about their Traxxas 2.5 or 3.3 rods have split down the middle. Usually, that's because of a lean condition. I've never had that happen, and I've had over at least a dozen of those engines, and I ran them until they were dead. Until there was no compression left. Replace the sleeve and piston, and back up and working. So that's breaking in. You're going to want to heat cycle it. Some people like to continue running it until the pinch is gone, and the pinch is when the sleeve actually grabs the piston. RB Mods actually does this, and this can vary. This varies from engine to engine how many gallons you're going to have to put through it. It could be 3/4 of a gallon all the way up to 2.5 gallons of fuel. That takes a while. A person that's just looking to have fun, they're not going to really worry about getting rid of the pinch. They just want to have fun, so they're going to break it in. Pinch is still going to be there, but after you do the 5 tanks, put it down on the ground. At this time, you can start giving it some gas, but you're going to want to only give it about 25 to 50% throttle for maybe 3 seconds max, and just put around. That's it. You do not give it 100% gas. You'll dramatically shorten the life of the engine. So yeah, just put around for another tank, and then that would be the 6th tank. 7th tank, you can go up to 50 and stay at 50%. Don't go above. And this is when endpoints can really come in. Set your throttle to 50%. So even if you completely give it, let me get a transmitter right quick. Even if you give it full throttle, it's only going to open at 50%. And that's when endpoints come in great. Endpoints on the spectrum are actually known as travel. So with this one, throttle, I just set it down to 50%. but not going to do that. So yeah, just set it down to 50%. That would be the 7 tank. 8 tank, 75%. Remember, no longer than 3 seconds. On and on. And then get on the brake, slow it down, and then do it again. Just keep doing it until the tank's gone. Never let it completely run out of fuel. When you see that it's getting really, really low, stop, let it cool off, and then refuel it. You never want it to completely run out of fuel, especially during break-in. Because if it runs out of fuel, you're going to have metal on metal contact. Don't want that. Once you get to, so you got the first 5 tanks. That's just idling. 6 tank, 25 to 50%. 7 tank, 50%. 8 tank, 50 to 75%. 9 tank, 75%. 10 tank, 100%. But only about 2 or 3 seconds at 100%. You don't want this engine to get to its absolute max RPM yet. It's not fully broken in. So, and after every one of these tanks, for me, usually it takes 10 to 12 tanks to get tanks, not gallons, tanks, as in the car. It usually takes me 10 to 12 tanks to get an engine broken in to the point that, okay, I feel comfortable actually running this hard and bashing with it, so on and so forth. Certain engines, like my racing engines, I do temper. So that's pretty much the basics when it comes to. There's this video. This is going to be a series of videos. This is just part 1. When you get a new RC car, you're breaking in the nitro engine. This is how we go about breaking in the nitro engine. Do not go by Traxxas. Do not go by HPI. You can do all kind of research, and everything out there says manufacturers. The way manufacturers set it out is to give you the shortest engine life possible, but to have fun. That's going to make them more money because you're going to have to replace your engine sooner. Say, if you were to do it Traxxas, the way Traxxas wants, you're going to get, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 gallons through it. But if you do it the correct way, like the way I do it, you get 10 gallons plus. And gallons of gas, not tanks, gallons. So, and I personally, another thing you're going to have to look at is what fuel are you running. I've said many times I don't like Traxxas, but I love Traxxas nitro program. They've got great nitro vehicles, but their fuel sucks. Personally, if you're going to go with a fuel, go with someone who makes fuels. Morgan's, VP, O'Donnell's. There's so many out there. There's 5 main ones. I can't think of every one right now. But there's 5 main ones that you're going to want to stick with, and I'll try to put that in the description down below. But there's 5 different main fuel companies that you're going to want to stick with. Honestly, don't go with the race blends, because the race blends, like what I use, has no castor oil in it. It's full synthetic and it's 8%. If you're new to this, you're going to end up frying your motor, because at that point the tuning gap is so you have to get the tuning almost perfect. If you don't, you're going to fry it, or it's going to run so rich that it's never going to get up to temp. A kid that I help, and I'm actually building a rustler for right now, he actually went with this and he ended up killing the motor. So best to stay with maybe 10 to 12% and a speed blend, so that would be synthetic and castor oil. Castor oil is more forgiving than just pure synthetic, and that also opens up your tuning gaps, so it's not as you don't have to be as dead on with it. But yeah, when it comes after you got it broken in, and say you got a used vehicle and it's having problems starting, and when it does start, it idles really high, and you've richen it out to the point that it shuts off or something like that, that is most likely an air leak. And like I said, it can happen at the back plate, it can happen at the front bearing, it can happen at possibly the glow plug if there's no gasket on it, the copper gasket. It could happen at any of the lines. You've got the pressure line coming off the pipe, you've got the fuel line itself coming. I mean, the tank could be cracked. So there's several places that you could have pressure. It's basically a pressure breach. You're losing fuel pressure. So not enough fuel is getting to it, so there's more air than fuel going in, and it's going to run really high. The idle is going to be high. And it's also going to be a pain in the butt to start. With this vehicle, this is a Kyosho MP7.5. I finally got it running. I did a running video of it. With this, I have to set the trim to open the throttle a little, but once it starts, I can put it back down, set the throttle back to normal, and it stays starting. You never want to have a nitro vehicle to the point that you have to hold the throttle for it to stay running. You should be able to let it go, and it should be able to idle by itself. A lot of people like to do a pinch test, where they'll start it and then they'll pinch the gas line. Gas lines, like on Revos, are really long. Gas line on this is really short, so that's not a very conclusive test. And also, people have what's known as loading up. That's when so much fuel loads up inside that doesn't get burnt that the engine shuts down. I don't like mine to load up at all. So, yeah, and I never have temperature problems. This one, I had never ran it, and this is a used engine. And I got the sleeve and the piston repinched, finally. But the first time I ran it, temperatures were at about 224. Perfect. It's not that fast. It's only got a 13-tooth pinion, well, a 13-tooth clutch bell with a 48-tooth spur, so that's not going to get me a lot of speed. I have a 15-tooth I'm going to put on to get a little more speed. I'll lose a little acceleration, but this is a GS21 from Kyosho. Doesn't have the best pipe. It works. This vehicle right here actually won a world championship. Not this exact vehicle, but a replica of this vehicle under the hands of a professional driver won the world championship. I believe it was back in 2006. So yeah, this is one of my prizes, one of my collectibles. And this is also the Inferno Neo. Is based off this chassis right here, except a lot of the metal parts like the chassis braces, steering brace, stuff like that are made with plastic. Shock towers still metal, your shocks themselves may be plastic. But no, that's pretty much it when it comes to the basics of getting your nitro and getting it started and getting it running. If you go to give it gas and it dies, most likely it's either too rich or too lean. A lot of the times I've seen it's actually too lean. So open up your high speed needle. When you get on the gas 100%, your low speed needle is no longer in play at all. Your high speed needle is fully in play, and it's just dumping fuel into the carburetor, thus into the engine, giving you your high speeds. And if it doesn't have enough fuel, it'll die very quickly. If it has too much fuel, you actually hear it bog down, then die. If it dies immediately, you're not getting enough fuel. If it bogs down, then dies, it's too rich. And also, if you go to pull on this, if you have a pull starter, anything, first thing you're going to want to do if anything weird happens is try spinning over the flywheel by hand. If it does not turn over freely, and it's not wanting to turn over, remove your glow plug. Nitro motors are very prone to having what's known as a hydrostatic lock. That's when so much fuel gets in the combustion chamber that we all know liquids can't be compressed. Well, if you try to yank it, you're going to end up breaking your pull start. If you're using a bump box, you're going to end up breaking your rod, parts of your crankshaft, and also with a roto start, Tiger drive. That's why it says no longer than 5 seconds. If it doesn't start within 5 seconds, something's wrong. So don't just keep running it and keep running it. That's just going to kill your battery, and also it's going to put a lot of wear on the engine. If it doesn't fire up within, like some of my older motors, it maybe takes 20 pulls, but I'm pulling really fast, like on these when I did a video. I mean, I'm having to pull like this. And that's just easier than pulling, and not really fast. So, personally, I prefer bump start and then having a pull start to, if it stalls out for some reason, put a glow plug igniter on there, just give it a pull, it's right back up and running, instead of having to carry that big box around. Yes, they're more prone to having air leaks because you have the shaft coming out of the back of the engine that doesn't have a bearing, but it actually has a brass bushing that the shaft comes through. So yeah, they're more likely to have air leaks. My OS 30, it's a full bump start motor. There's a plate on the back that has no hole in it. They were known really bad to have air leaks. The journals or the connecting rods would get sort of wallered out, and you wouldn't have the tight tolerances, so it would sort of move around too much, and that would cause problems. All this information I've either heard from someone else, and not when I mean heard, I've actually talked to them. Rick from RB Mods, Neil Smith from the Nitro shop. I actually talk to them on a pretty frequent basis. If I have a problem, I actually go to them and ask them. Rarely do I have problems now because I'm 2 years in and only doing Nitro and 5th scale. I can pretty much get everything figured out myself and also help others. And that's what I really love about this hobby, is helping others. Not just helping yourself, helping others. So that's the basics when it comes to getting started. Break it in correctly. Did that at the very beginning. Once you do the 5 tanks. Some people may say more. Personally, I found 5 tanks and I can get over 10 gallons out of an engine. And then get it on the ground, 25, then 25 to 50, 50 to 75, 75, then 75 to 100, then 100. Basically 10 to 12 tanks, depending on how the engine is acting. I mean, you can't just... there's certain things that you're going to have to learn as you go. You can't really be told. It's experience. Thankfully, my very first car I still have. It's a T-Max 3.3, the large one, the longer wheelbase. I got nitro under my belt and I've loved it ever since. There's been many times I've gone to tracks and people would say brushless is better, and then say, okay, let's take it out to the track. I would end up winning, and then they would come over with the excuse, well, it's not geared right, stuff like that. It's like, okay, well then, why are you saying all this stuff is better? We both put our vehicles down at the same spot. We both took off the same spot. You were on 4S. I was on running a 21. Yet I outran you. Even in the straightaways, I outran you. So obviously, brushless is good, but then you get into chemistry of lipos, all that stuff. I've done videos on that as well. So, yeah, that's it when it comes to this. Got any questions, comments? Hit me down below. I'll try to remember if I can remember the 5 fuels. You got O'Donnell, Morgan, VP, give me a second, I'm having to think. Those are the main ones. I know there are 2 other, but I can't remember the damn names right off the top of my head. Because I use O'Donnell. And that's what I've always... With Morgan, you've got Sidewinder. Oh, Byron's. Byron's Gen 2. That's really good. And then there's one other. But don't get any from like Dynamite, Blue Thunder, Traxxas. I run 30%. I only run 30%. When I went from 20% to 30%, it was like someone put a supercharger on these motors. Seriously, that's how much of a difference there is. So that's it. This is part 1. Part 2 will be troubleshooting certain problems when it comes to tuning and keeping it running. So thanks for watching. Peace.